Hello, everyone. Oh, I've just realised I've got my headphones in the wrong way around. How embarrassing. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stream. Please let me know if you can hear me. Um, so today we've got quite a funny topic, which hopefully you've seen in the title, and we'll introduce in a bit um, when our special guest comes on, which is exciting. This should be fun and but also informative. You know, we'll learn some things about gender critical people. Um, but also, you might have just clicked on this because you've seen a really crap thumbnail. Uh, if maybe if you're watching this in the future, this video doesn't have a crap thumbnail. But if it does, then you'll know why, and that's because I'm just about to ask mods if you could possibly do a poll in chat of doing should Katie keep the crap thumbnail or make a good one. If we get like 3-1, keep the crap one, then we'll keep it, and if not, then I'm just going to make a good one because I have a feeling less people are going to click on the crap thumbnail. But you never know. You know, people like Microsoft Paint apparently. Um, but anyway, let's get into it. So, this week my special guest is all the way from Australia, Amy Sargeant. Hi, Amy. Would you like to
Hey, how's
introduce
it going?
yourself? I'm good, thanks. It's the evening for me, but it's like breakfast time for you.
Yes.
Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself?
hmm Yeah, my name's Amy Sargeant. Firstly, thank you for having me. We're here to talk about something very serious, so I'm glad this is, my debut chatting with you. Um,
This is
I'm
what you're going
I'm
to be
a
known for forevermore.
yeah, okay, I'm rethinking this. No, yeah, my name's Amy Sargeant. I'm a protest artist, and musician, and also trans rights activist here in Mianjin, also known as Brisbane, Australia.
Oh, it's wicked. Yeah, so I asked for your description just to write in the the description um beforehand, and you were like protest artist, and I was like, okay, cool, paste that in. No idea what that is. What was a protest artist before we get going?
Yeah, well, it means that the art I make is directly related to our
Oh,
struggle
okay.
as trans people, as queer people, as people living under the dictatorship of capital. That's the work I make directly responds to those conditions and what happens to us day to day. And I think, protest does a certain thing, us chatting here does a certain thing, us going crazy on Twitter does a certain thing, but also through the vehicle of art, whether that's visual art, big installations, or sound, you can touch people on another level, a level that those things miss. And through that, you can communicate things about whether it be the trans experience or other stuff that other modes might miss. So, it's nice to let out some of that trans rage on
Yeah,
stage with the guitar on and amps and big, huge ribcage vibrating frequencies and stuff. So
yeah, yeah. I
covering
was
all the bases.
Yeah, I think yeah, like as much as like political shouting is important, like loads of protest is through art, and well for me at least, particularly through music. I'm sure that there is protest through film and all kinds of other dance and everything, but I'm a music person, so but yeah, like loads of music I like. I like it because it's just angry at the world, and in fact, so earlier this year I was at a music festival in France called Hellfest, and they had this like American hardcore band on, and I'm not super into hardcore. I'm getting into it, and they came out, and I was like just sitting at the back with my brother, just like having a drink, and it was like the middle of the day, and then he comes out like hardcore bands always like pumped up, and they're like marching up and down the stage, and he's like, "We're someone from wherever they were, New York or something," and he's like, our country's just taken human rights away from half the people in our country, and like we're here to be angry about that. And I was like, right, I'm going right to the front. I'm getting all
Yeah,
my
yeah,
rage out of
totally.
this like bullshit.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
so yeah, no, it's great. It's protest through all the different arts is a good thing. um and also you could protest obviously through art, and you could also protest like political stuff on Twitter, or maybe through the radio. um or you could even potentially protest just with strategic Twitter liking, maybe, if people look at those kinds of things, which apparently some people do. So, yeah, so I think people have seen the title of the video. So my understanding is some dude in your country who's quite in charge of a important radio station or is a host on a radio station.
Mhm,
Uh, he had some
mhm.
anti-trans shenanigans, and then he had some sexy time trans shenanigans, and they seem to have intertwined. Um, which is we can go into later. Not as much of a surprise as people might think. But yeah, so what do you want to give the what's the premise of this? Something like a radio interview or
Mhm. Let's give the rundown, right? So, the ABC, I know there's an American ABC. In Australia, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, that's our state broadcaster. It's our state-run media.
yeah,
Um,
like
and
England's BBC
and
or UK
yes,
BBC. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Um, and they have localized radio stations, obviously. One of those is ABC Brisbane, which is where I am. It's the capital city of Queensland. Very big state, so it's a it's a station that reaches a lot of people.
yeah.
Um, Broadcasted on AM, FM bands, online, blah blah blah. And
Yeah,
Steve
apparently
Austin
people
is
still listen to radio. That's news to me.
yeah, I listen to radio sometimes for music, like KEXP
Okay.
is good. Shout out KEXP. Um, um, but uh, but yes, so Steve Austin is a radio host who has been associated with the ABC for a really long time. I'm not sure exactly how long, but decades potentially.
This is getting better the more I learn.
Yes. So he's not some new dude. He's a veteran broadcaster, you might say. And he's always, I remember hearing his voice um, sitting in the car being driven to school. He's always been in those prime time kind of slots for radio. Yeah, as we said, for people that actually listen to radio. So in the morning, driving to work, and in the afternoon. So the show that he hosts currently is called Drive, ABC Drive. And so it's the afternoon slot when people are coming home from work. Again, people who listen to the radio in their car will have that on.
Yeah.
And so his name is pretty synonymous with radio around here. He has all of the relevant political figures, MPs, on his program. So it's a pretty kind of respected program. The ABC is generally pretty respected
Right.
in
I
Australia.
guess yeah, lots of I don't know, I was gonna say lots of state broadcasters are quite respected. Then that depends very much on what country you're in. But
Yeah,
I guess the point of ABC is being neutral rather than being like some uh taking a side on political issues, not like a right wing radio station or a left wing one or something. Yeah.
totally. So yes, that's not to say the ABC is perfect.
Well, no one's politically neutral and everything, or anything
Yes.
really, but
Yeah, but it is considered to be a more reliable source than the Murdoch press and other commercial outlets. It is
right.
considered to be a few rungs up from that. And they don't run ads, blah 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 blah. So it's kind of in the more serious tier, and that's partly why they have much more serious kind of political pundits who come on,
Usually.
so on and so forth. So the Steve Austin guy,
So that just to clarify, this is Steve Austin, not as Stone Cold Steve Austin, who
no, not that guy. This is an Australian Steve Austin. Yeah, different guy. ABC Steve Austin, let's call him. Or just
we
assume
could-
that when we say his name, that's
instead
who we're
of
talking about.
Stone Cold, we could pick the opposites, like warm and wood, for example.
Okay, warm Steve.
Warm wood.
Steve.
Warm wood might be appropriate. Anyway,
He was
yeah,
probably
yeah.
pretty warm last night, looking at his Twitter notifications. But anyway, warm to boiling hot. Now, okay, so where were we? So this Steve Austin guy has this primetime slot, has all these pundits on, and currently in Australia, we're in the process of updating what's called the Births, Deaths and Marriages Act in each of our states and territories. And where I am, Queensland, we're one of two states who are yet to make these changes. The changes I'm talking about would allow trans and gender diverse people to update our birth certificates and other forms of identification without undergoing surgery.
Right.
So right now on my birth certificate, it says male and all my kind of official documents.
Oh,
Um,
so they're all. So yes. Sorry, I'm kind of ignorant about Australia's situation. I've looked into it a little, but so I know it's dependent on state and territory. But so
mm,
in the UK, you can change your passport and your driving license and various other things like your bank and stuff straight away. Like one of the first things you do in transition, you need no. You need almost, there's no
mm,
kind of like process. Well, there is process. Changing a passport obviously is a big faff and expensive, but to change your birth certificate, we've got this whole archaic system which takes 45 pages of application and 2 years of waiting and a medical diagnosis and all that stuff. But that doesn't gate off your driving license, for example, your ID card or whatever. But
mhm.
so you're saying in Queensland they're all tied together? Is that the case?
Yeah, basically to properly update all this stuff, you need to have undergone surgery. It's not enough to be chemically castrated, you have to be surgically castrated,
Right.
basically.
Which is
And yeah,
inhumane, like to require people to be castrated in order to
yeah,
have human
and
rights
it's
is
inaccessible
nuts.
too. Like
Yeah,
it's just so expensive. A lot of
yeah,
people who would want to do that just can't.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, we're in the process, we have been in the process of fighting to change that. We have a state government, our Labor Party, who is in state government right now, who are more progressive than our Conservative Party, but still have a lot of problems with transphobia and don't really
Sounds
push the
familiar.
bar forward on queer stuff. They wait for society to be more than ready and then they do it.
Yeah.
So the current thing that TERFs are freaking out about in Queensland, Australia, and more broadly, obviously, is self ID, which
Self.
is what
Oh,
they
oh, oh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's what they use to describe these changes. That so you will be able to self-identify as whatever you want. And so they're freaking out about the fact that we're trying to change these things. There's a climate where in the city where I am every weekend, the TERF Brigade, who go under the banner of International Women's Day, um, even though they have nothing to do with that organization, they call themselves International Women's Day and march down the street with big signs and war drums, um, freaking out about this stuff. So it's a pretty hostile environment with regard to this push. And the bill, after years and years of trying to make this happen, after petitions and letters and hundreds and of thousands of meetings and consultations, the bill to make this happen was tabled in Queensland Parliament yesterday afternoon, my time.
Yay! That's
Say,
exciting.
yeah. Now, this bill's not perfect, but we
Progress.
weren't expecting
Yeah.
perfection from this government, but it will hopefully change the big issue, which is just you will be able to update that gender marker on your birth certificate. At the
This all
same time,
sounds. Sorry to cut. Sorry to keep cutting
no,
in.
go.
It all just sounds like super familiar. Like it's exactly what Scotland's going on right now. I mean, it's what
Mhm,
England and Wales have had going on as well. But we
yeah,
obviously had a far right government which blocked us. But Scotland's got the exact same thing. Like fought for years. There's loads of freaking out. There's loads of gender critical people like LARPing as feminists and supporting all of the anti-feminist people.
mhm.
And then the bill gets tabled and it's not quite perfect. And then there's a huge drawn out debate. And it's, yeah, I think this is like one of the templates for progressing. I mean, it is an important trans right, but it's not the most important like thing, is it? It's not like giving free healthcare to everyone or but it's the
Totally.
proxy battle we're having in lots of the world at the moment. So
Totally.
yeah.
It's an important step, but it's a tiny first step. Like it's kind of like getting marriage equality. Like it's like, yeah, obviously we finally need to do that, like, but there's still 50,000 other things on the
Yeah,
list that are
right.
super important as well.
So
It's not like, okay, equality is achieved.
the talking of marriage equality, in like one of the things that I've been saying a lot is all transphobia is recycled homophobia. And I don't know if it's strictly
Mm.
true to say all of it, but so many of the major transphobic arguments are just rebranded anti-gay ones. You know, like
Oh,
you
totally,
can't be, you're not
totally.
safe around children, all this kind of thing. It's the same. And
Yes.
in the UK, the gender critical groups have made a big effort to try and distance themselves from that. But in
Mm.
Australia, Marriage Alliance, which was like one of your major anti-gay marriage campaigners, like the day after the gay marriage thing passed, uh, just rebranded to Binary Australia and are now an anti-trans group.
Yes.
So it's like it
Yes.
couldn't be any more transparent what this is. This is like
Absolutely.
the new thing to do anti-LGBT
Yes.
rights. Yeah, it's
Yeah, and it's just a constant,
it's just such a shit. I can't
it's
believe
all a
people fall for
smokescreen,
it.
really.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
smokescreen for much more nefarious things that they are really seeking to do. And obviously, once this bill does pass and it becomes law, they will just move on to the next thing. It'll
yeah.
be about children's hospitals, and that they are,
Adoption. Yeah,
it's interesting talking about the UK context, and here, because that's really the big thing they're trying to do is import what has happened in the UK to Australia. They're using that as the script,
yeah. Of
the
course.
same conspiracy theories, all the same rubbish they're trying to pull here. And we recently had a federal election here, and that was one of the big controversies in our conservative federal party, was them seeking to turn this into a big sticking point, kind of culture war sticking point. Luckily, it kind of blew up in their faces, but the turfs are still here. So,
Yeah, it seems to have blown up in a lot of places. It's like obviously everywhere has toughs and gender criticals,
mm,
and some places have it a lot worse than the UK does. But our specific brand that works so well in like liberal media doesn't seem to work in other places so well. And like I know because
mm,
your government who just got voted out tried to make it a major issue. It was a massive failing, and the Republican Party tried to make it a major issue, and it was a big failing for them and a big waste of money.
mm,
So it's
mm.
interesting that. But anyway, yeah. Sorry, Karen. Before I
Yeah, I
distract
mean,
the
I
whole
think it's
time.
because no, I think it's because like most people just don't really care
No,
that
yeah.
much
Most
about
people don't
trans
care.
people.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to go up to them and say, "Oh, kids are being surgically mutilated. Did you know that they're trying to make this a thing?" They'd be like, "Oh, I don't really like that."
Hmm.
But they don't think about trans people all the time, like TERFs do.
Yeah.
So, like people with TERF brain, like think that everyone else can be drawn in like that, but not everyone has that kind of numb conspiratorial
Yeah. Yeah.
mindset. So,
You have to be
yeah,
ready to like QAnon or whatever ridiculous
yeah,
conspiracy of the day
it's
is.
all interlinked
Yeah.
completely,
But like
completely.
you've got to have that brain as well, haven't you, for like just getting obsessed with railing on some group of people. Like that you that's got to be a
Yeah.
thing you do. Because
Yeah, I mean, it's not normal, is it? It's not normal to base your identity around a minority group
that
and
you're not
put
part
that as
of.
the first thing in your bio. That's the t-shirt you wear when you go out. That's all they think about. That's all that their friend groups are people like that. Like,
Well, who else is
you
going to
know.
be friends with them, to be fair? So,
Yeah, well, yeah.
but yeah, anyway, so you've got this big thing coming, and like the laws has been tabled. So I guess the media wants to discuss it, and I guess this is where Warm Wood Steve Austin comes in. Um,
Yeah, warm Steve. So yeah, right. So this bill is being tabled in Queensland Parliament. Across the river from Queensland Parliament, just a few hundred meters, is the HQ of ABC Brisbane, where they broadcast their radio programs. Steve Austin, Warm Steve, is in there, and a few hours prior to the show beginning, a figure viewers might be aware of, Sal Grover, um,
yeah, let's.
announced she was set to appear on the program.
So
Do you want to provide context about Sal
yeah,
Grover?
yeah. So I just thought, I mean, maybe some of my viewers will be aware of Sal Grover from the Transatlantic Call-In Show. So like some kind of props to Sal is, I would say that she's, I don't know if major gender critical is really right. Like she's like a B plus tier gender critical. Like I guess major probably in an Australia world, but from the UK perspective, not quite so major. And she's the only gender critical who people might have heard of who's had the guts to call into the Transatlantic Call-In show. So, you know, little just a applause for that. But she's also, what you probably know her from if you've been on Twitter, is she's the founder of and CEO of Giggle, which apparently doesn't have a capital G, which is the cis women only dating app, which does some phrenology brain scan of your face or whatever, and then decides whether you're a biological female or not. Which has, had some mixed results. But to be fair, apparently a relaunch is coming soon. But I mean, anyone who's done any computer science ever will know that the idea of using face scanning technology to determine someone's birth sex is, especially when the entire goal of the app is to filter out trans people, is good luck, basically. And there's been lots of alleged security issues, which you might want to Google if you were looking to set up an account on a app which explicitly bans trans women. Anyway, so maybe that's how you know Sal Grover. Maybe you don't, and maybe this is your introduction to her. But she's a gender critical activist. Would be probably how she'd describe herself.
Yep, and she, is interlinked with all of these groups, the groups fighting against self-ID and all of this kind of stuff. So she's sitting in the waiting room at ABC Brisbane, waiting to go on Warm Steve's program, and she tweeted just when she was meant to go on. Now, I'm going to be real. I was having a nap at this exact moment, but when I woke up, I discovered that she found out moments before going on air that management had stepped in and stopped her from appearing on the program. Now, a lot of these gender critical
That's because they hate women, obviously, and they've silenced a woman, and that's the end of the story. I think.
A lot of these gender critical folks have said, I know who stepped in and stopped Sal Grover from appearing. It was Amy Sargeant. She made the call and sent in the troops and stopped them. To be honest, I mean, I'd love to take credit for that because it's so funny, but it really wasn't me. Like, I know some folks who did get in touch with ABC about her appearance, but I don't even know if those messages were read.
So there's,
and I wasn't calling the shots,
Well, exactly. But so the reason why people were calling in at all and why you're being accused of cancelling her, I guess, is two things. One is, why are they having, I mean, if we just do generally step back and just ignore the context of everything going on, why are you interviewing a cis person about trans rights? Why are you getting on someone who opposes more trans rights than just the bill in discussion, who's obviously, part of all kinds of ridiculous extreme organizing against our human rights in general, without having all that context, without it being like a challenge on her? Like, if it was some kind of thing like, oh, she's released this app and we're going to do a show on this app, and then we're going to be like, hey, Giggle has signed the WDI declaration, which calls to eliminate almost all trans rights, full stop, and WDI said they want to eliminate transgenderism. Can you answer that question? If they were going to do that, that's one thing. But so that's already bullshit, like having someone on like that talk about our rights. But then secondly, like ABC and like the BBC in the UK at least pretend to be neutral. So they were meant to have, like, they're not meant to have just her on. Is that like the case? Is that what people were saying? Or
yeah, it's in the ABC's code that if you're gonna have someone like that on who campaigns for a certain viewpoint, that you need to have on an alternate viewpoint.
Which is kind of a garbage policy, because like my certain viewpoint that, like, the world is round, doesn't mean we should be finding some flat earth knobhead. But
yes.
I mean,
it's like climate scientist, climate denier. Let's see who wins in the marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, but at least if you're going to have, like, in my opinion, and of course the gender criticals think this is ridiculous, but I think I can justify this. I think it'd be fine to have just a trans person on to ask them about trans rights and campaigning for making the world better. But if you're going to have an anti-trans campaigner on, then at the very least you need to balance them with a trans person, because they've got some regressive garbage political ideology which hurts people, and so they need to have someone to balance them, to like fact check at the very least. Um,
Totally.
but yeah, so that
Yeah,
wasn't
and
that
in
wasn't
my
as
view,
good for
that's
everyone.
not even. Yeah, in my view, that's not even, it's not even good enough. And I know we
Mm.
can't even hope for that, but just in my view, having a debate with a turf on air to an audience, that's really harmful because as we know, right wingers love debating because in the arena of debate, you can cite made up stats, you can use bad
You can
faith
gish gallop,
tactics, you
yeah.
can play on the prejudices of the audience in coded ways, which is all they do. All the turf rhetoric is coding, and it leaves the person from the vulnerable minority, with no space to properly fact check unless they've memorized every paper and every conspiracy website ever.
But
Really,
even
in my
then,
view, yeah,
yeah, even then, because it
even
like
then.
if someone says 15 things at you, you might remember like the first two and the last one or something, and you
Mhm,
can debunk them, but
mhm,
you don't remember 15 things.
yeah.
So you need to like pause it, and that's why I think real debate happens in writing,
Mm,
rather than face to face, or
mm.
in response videos, I guess. If
Yeah, video essays, obviously.
yeah,
Yeah. And live streams, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, in my view, the role of a public broadcaster or any media outlet who actually wants to thoughtfully cover topics like this would be to educate viewers and kind of understand there is a climate of violence around trans people, our existence, our fight for rights. And there are these conspiracists pushing narratives that just aren't true.
mm.
Like the mutilating kids, all this stuff, it's not real. It's not a real thing. And so the role of any media outlet who wanted to, thoughtfully, truthfully cover that would be to take on an educating role and bring on experts, bring on people with lived experience to educate. It wouldn't be to, let's get the Ku Klux and the other person in the room and see who
Yeah,
wins. Like,
fight. Yeah, and no, like
mm,
it's on the education thing. Um,
mhm,
I just think that the gender critical movement as like a thing would have just never like had the power and like momentum they do if even if they were just totally platformed but then were fact checked. Like we've had so many media articles being like, oh, so and so from, I hate transpeople.com or whatever says that the Gender Recognition Act reform means that any man will be able to watch your child getting dressed or whatever. But then they could say,
mm,
but the GRA reforms don't affect what spaces people can use. And if they just had that sentence every single time,
mhm,
and every TV interview they did with them, the presenter
mhm.
was just taught what the bill actually does, so they could say, oh yeah, but that doesn't actually affect. Then how would the conspiracy movement wouldn't have had as much power to go ahead as it does? Yeah, so
Yeah,
totally agree.
totally.
But anyway, let's get on to the juicy part.
The main event.
So so Sal was pulled off probably just because people were saying it's biased, but then so people, I guess people were complaining. So from my understanding is some people on Twitter at least, and probably in other places, were complaining to Warm Steve um, that he was having on a gender critical person with no like balance. Why the hell are you hosting one of these people?
Mhm,
Um, and went to look at his Twitter activity because one of the first things that you can do, like you say, gender critical people often is their entire personality. And you can click on someone's profile and they're following all of the big gender critical accounts and they've retweeted 100 different ridiculous gender critical conspiracy theories and they've got all the memes in their bio and that happens so much. And sometimes you see this like, right wing man trying to present himself as neutral, being like, "Oh well, I just have concerns about trans, and like I've changed my mind." And you click through,
mhm,
and there's like 6 years worth of retweeting like gender critical people, and you're like, "Oh well, so everything you said is just a lie. You're just a gender
mhm.
critical activist." So I guess people wanted to see if that was the case, and that is the case, right? He's been retweeting and liking gender critical stuff.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure if he ever retweeted anything,
Okay,
but
just liking.
in in his Twitter likes were a number of posts which would be considered gender critical, and a number which would could be allegedly considered transphobic.
Yeah, I think I mean I would say that so I know you've posted some examples, which we'll look at in a second. Um, but the ones I'm looking at are gender critical. I think we can, do an
Okay.
allegedly transphobic, but certainly there's one here from Angie Jones who's wearing a woman, adult human, female T-shirt, and Angie Jones is like a gender critical campaigner.
Angie
Who
Jones is my best friend, and I just want to give her a shout out because I know she's watching. Angie, thank you for mentioning me every week on your Turf Talk podcast. I love you so much, Angie.
So yeah, so like I don't think Angie Jones would disagree with the characterization that she is a gender critical campaigner, even
Mhm.
if anyway. But so for people who don't go on Twitter, which I don't know, probably no one who follows me
Smart
doesn't go on
people.
Twitter. Smart people, for the smart people in the audience who don't go on Twitter, on some social media sites, you might repost something that everyone can see, but then you can like things, and maybe no one can see likes. And so, like, I don't know if in Reddit people can see what upvotes you've done, or I'm not really sure. I don't use Reddit, but like some social media sites you can't. But Twitter, all likes are public. Everything you've ever liked, someone can go through and find evidence that you've liked it, which is maybe not how all social media works. And if you're not so clued up, you might not realize that.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, Warm Steve, I think, is in his 60s at least. So,
oh,
yeah.
Steve.
So, yes. Warm Steve did not kick her off the program. What Sal claimed on her profile, on her tweets, was that ABC management stepped in. Warm Steve, he's a good guy. He wanted to have me on, but ABC management stepped in at the last minute and stopped me from coming on. That's what Sal Grover said. But yeah, as you said, all of Warm Steve's likes are public, and they were being looked at because people wanted to say, was he going to say anything about this? What's this dude about? A lot of people were paying attention to him in that moment, who may otherwise not have, as we said. A lot of people, a lot of younger people, are not listening to drive time AM radio. So
So
it was
here's
discovered.
yeah, just the bottom two tweets that he posted of some gender critical things that he's liked. So here's one from Angie
Mhm.
Jones, best friend of this show now, I think, saying they will still say men, but if it's a condition that impacts women, we are people with a cervix, menstruators, etc. A classic gender critical line. Then we've got here, if there are more than two genders, why do trans people only transition between the two? Which obviously doesn't make any sense because one of the things they're most angry about is non-binary people. And then a Lauren Chen here saying, can we get the whole thing? Yeah. If gender isn't about biology, then why does transitioning gender involve medications and surgery meant to change biology? They're so dumb questions, my goodness. Just so you can see all of them. But yeah, these are the kind of like just asking questions. I don't really want to know the answer. Gender critical garbage, which 24,000 likes for something that stupid. My goodness. By the way, just because I always like addressing these head on, the reason. So, oh my goodness, where to start? But like, so the reason why people transition isn't just because gender, like as if that's a reason. It's to address like dysphoria. It's to get your, use your body autonomy to get your body into the state that you feel like best matches you and reduces your like suffering. Um, and not because, it's not like, you know what? I'm a woman, therefore I have to do the following things, which is the claim that she is strawmanning, suggesting we're
Mhm.
making. So that's why, because they're just, I mean, isn't that not obvious to people? Um, Maybe not. Anyway, but that wasn't the only thing he was liking. So
Yes, so alongside those gender critical folks in his likes, there was a lot of pornography, not links, like straight up videos on Twitter, and
this is all
the
censored, by the way,
vast
everyone watching. Don't worry, you're not about to see porn. This is all YouTube
uh,
safe.
the vast majority of that content was trans women. It was pornography depicting trans women on men. Uh,
I just, oh man, so this, so yeah, here we go. Steve Austin from the radio, uh, liking something from Shemale Kingdom. And then, oh, just this poor lady's face. She's having a good time, so good for her. But you know, that's a good one. And oh, we've got another one here. Those are definitely large. Anyway, yeah, there's some examples. But so there was a lot of this, some of this, two of these. I
there
mean,
was a lot. Now, I didn't want to fill up my, I didn't want to make a thread of just screenshots of censored porn clips. So I only put a couple of examples in that thread that I posted. But there was
I'll put this
hundreds
thread in the
of
description.
these videos. So it's not just like the old J.K. Rowling accidental click. I'm an old person. I don't know what I'm
Middle-aged
doing. I accidentally
moment.
hit like.
Yeah.
It's there were hundreds, if not thousands, of porn clips depicting trans women in his Twitter likes on his professional radio Twitter account. And those
Interleaved
went
with this, like, oh, if there's two genders.
interweaves with TAF stuff. Yep. And they went back years. Like, it wasn't just the last week. It wasn't just like, oh, I was just doing some research for my interview with Sal Grover. They went back years and years and years. He had like 35,000 likes. And spoilers, his account is not up anymore. But while it was up, I was able to get back pretty far, as were other people who were doing the more serious detective work. And it just kept going. Like, it didn't stop. It wasn't like, oh, he discovered this in 2020. Like, it just kept going. So, yes, that was an interesting discovery.
So
Given he's a public figure, very well known, and this was his professional account. So, yeah.
yeah, so I gather that like so people found this and then made him aware of it and he like started deleting it. Was that like
So he was on air. His show was still happening. And a couple of people had mentioned it. Like, I had a few signal messages, people saying like, oh, did you see this in his likes? And I was like, yo, these are all kind of buried in threads.
yeah.
So I made a tweet just saying at ABC Brisbane, at radio_Austin, was gonna have Sal Grover on, and I just had a look and saw all this stuff in his likes. And yeah, that started to gain traction pretty quickly. And he was, on air at this time, and we started to notice that suddenly his number of liked posts started to rapidly go down while he was on air on the radio. And I didn't hear him on the radio at this time, but it was reported to me from another trans woman that they were listening and that he sounded like he was freaking out while he was trying to do his radio show.
Oh no,
So I don't know
I
if
feel
he was sitting there going, I'm like, you know,
But what's so
while
I
trying
didn't
to.
I don't know if anyone here is as addicted to Twitter as I am. /was, but no, still am. If you have like tens of thousands of tweets or tens of thousands of likes, if you go through by hand and delete them all, or you use like some free online tool to delete them all, you can only delete 3,200 or something. That's the limit,
Interesting.
and
Because that was about how many disappeared initially.
well, that's why. That's
You
because
might
if
have
you
quickly downloaded some app to do it.
tweet delete is one that I use that I recommend for if you want to delete the whole thing. So tweet delete's free tier, and the free most of the free websites will let you delete 3,200 likes or tweets. I think it's 3,200, and the reason is because Twitter's like public facing API. If you request all of someone's tweets, that is the limit that it will deliver you, and you can't actually ask for more. And so the tech way, if anyone interested of getting around that, is so tweet delete ask you to download all your Twitter data, and that uses a different process. It doesn't use the public facing API, and so you get every single tweet, and then you get a list of them all and you give them to tweet delete, and it goes through by URL and finds each one and then manually deletes it. So that's the only way you can delete them all. So you would have to pay for a service. So I suspect that's why 3,200 is like. But the thing is, if you've liked over 3,200 things, then you can't delete these likes without paying for a service. But that's fine. If this is a new thing, then 3,200 would have covered it. But if you delete 3,200 likes and then you've still got some porn in the like history, then maybe you've been liking porn for several years.
Yeah. That is very interesting. I didn't know that. And so while this was happening, that like number did drop down quite suddenly. But it dropped down, and then if you went into his like tab, then suddenly it went from you having to scroll a little bit to find the porn. It was at the very top, like, because he'd gone down 3,000, and at that point there was porn right there. So everyone was going on to check, and they didn't have to search for it. There was a video right there.
Steve.
And he, as you said, he would have been locked out. He wouldn't have been able to change that because he used that tool to reach the limit. So he would have been like, what the hell? Like, what do I do?
Like, it's just so perfect. Just like accidentally making it even worse.
Oh yeah, true. I guess he should have liked more stuff. He should have liked 3,000 posts to bury it.
Yeah, exactly. Then no one would be able to find it. I was just trying to look here because there's someone else who I follow on Twitter. I think. Let me just check that this is all YouTube safe before I bring this thread up.
Safe for YouTube.
Okay, so I know that someone has archived all of his likes as well. So I think they're now indefinitely available, or at least. So that's interesting. I think maybe this is okay. But yeah, so someone who I follow on Twitter, who I also recommend, is this person, Moby Dick Girl. I don't know how to say.
Isabel.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So it looks like this happened before the like discovery. So she's saying, ABC Brisbane, why are you hosting Sal? And Sal will be on Driver Steve Austin, and then as sent a message and etc. But then we have the discovery here by this person, Avery of Birds. Yeah, I think there's some more good info here, but I think they were just saying that basically all of it is archived, as far as I know.
Okay, nice.
Which is quite funny. But yeah, anyway, so it's a funny time. But yeah, so after that's why I was getting this one up actually. So he then said,
he locked his account initially. He locked it because I guess he realized that he couldn't unlike anymore, and he's like, oh my god, everyone's gonna see this. So he locked his account, but I had followed him really quickly before he did that, so I could still see. And then are you going to talk about what he tweeted subsequently?
Yeah, I was just trying to find a screenshot of it. Is it in your thread? So he's locked here, and then some he's frantically like more than 2,000 tweets. But no, before the next thing, he tweeted out saying that there had been like a
interference
with his account.
Yes.
I was just trying to find a screenshot of that, but
yeah, it's not in my thread. But I have got it. Let's pull up the quote.
Yeah, it would.
Here it is. This is what he said. So thank you to the person who alerted me to the interference with my Twitter account. I have taken appropriate action. I apologize to you if it has caused any problem with your feed.
So there's layers of funny here. So the first is, obviously he's trying to act like it's not him, but he hasn't.
Interference. It was the trolls.
But he hasn't done it in a way like I think if I discovered that someone had hacked my account and like liked a load of horrible things that I didn't want to associate myself with, then I would be like, whoa, what the fuck is happening? Like, guys, I think my account's been hacked. Like, what the hell? Like, this isn't like you can't trust anything that I've posted for the last how long, you know, like. But instead, he's just like, oh, there's been an interference. But I'd taken appropriate action, which is not deleting all the porn likes, unfortunately. But I also like this. I apologize to you if it has caused any problem with your feed, because at first you might be like, oh, well, he doesn't quite understand how Twitter works. But actually, this might have caused a thing on people's feed. People who followed him, because you do get like someone you follow has liked a tweet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
for
true,
years,
true.
potentially, and especially if his target audience is a bit older, like some old people might have just been like, oh. Oh, why is this on my feed? She's having a very good time.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean, in
Steve.
that way, I'm kind of surprised it's never come out, like that we've never known this before. But yeah,
How
just I
could
guess
it?
no one blew the lid on it. No one looked. I don't know, but
Incredible. I mean, the thing is, though,
mm,
he's got like, this means nothing to me. I mean, maybe if you're from Queensland, when you see Steve Austin, maybe you'd instantly think of him. But I think a lot of, most people, I saw, when I first saw this, actually, I just saw random gender critical man caught liking porn. Like that happens, every other month, basically.
mhm.
Um, and like it's just a dude with a statue profile picture, like just a generic
Yeah, the classic.
name.
Yeah,
I just thought, well,
yeah.
who, why would anyone, it's just like a normal, and he didn't even have that many followers. So, um, but yeah, so maybe that's, who knows how that went under the radar for so long, but that's.
Mm, mm.
So that was pretty funny, and then he realized that it was too late and deleted his account, and then that's where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, it should be said, like, because he works for the ABC, there has to be the appearance of being impartial. So he's not like known as some super conservative guy. He certainly hasn't been known as a gender critical person. I've never thought of him that way. As I said, I've heard his voice on the radio since I was a kid sitting in the back of the car being driven to primary school. So I just thought of him as that, just one of those cheerful people at the ABC, who, you know, who does the drive time
Yeah.
slot. And so there's multiple layers of brain explosion to this.
It's kind of disappointing, isn't it, that when you find out someone who you just considered as a
Yeah.
normal person turns out to have like some and I guess he's in an interesting position now, but liking tweets that you, in a way that you think is private, of saying things like, oh, there are only two genders, I guess
Mhm.
maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that he's full down the rabbit hole, thinks that um all of the craziest gender critical conspiracy theories. Um, but then again, maybe it does, and it's just hard to know. And it would be disappointing if that was the case. And I can imagine, especially if you grew up with him, that would be very disappointing. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, uh, him having Sal Grover on forms a part of that picture.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And especially like if I mean, no offense, Sal, but I don't really trust your perception of anything. Um, but if what she said is true, and the producer got rid of her and he was fighting to have her on, then maybe he is interested in platforming a gender critical
Oh
perspective.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's certainly the impression I got. But
mm,
yeah, can't know for sure.
but yeah, so I guess it's interesting because I wonder where this is going to go from here, because um, I guess one thing that I wish I could communicate to, the two things I'd always want to communicate to cis people in this situation, like the producers of ABC and BBC and CNN and all these news networks and stuff, is firstly, if someone is gender critical, they need to be pressed on it, because they'll do a J.K. Rowling and pretend that they are, care about feminists and LGBT rights or whatever, whilst
Mm.
supporting like one layer of separation, someone who has said they want to like morally mandate trans people out of existence, or admitted they're a transphobe, or said that Jews are behind trans rights or whatever, um, and they just don't do anything about that. And I wish that I could just say, look, just write what gender critical is, just say what gender critical is, and ask them, and
Mm.
make them take a position on it. Because if I say, if I could ask Warm Steve and say, look, mate, some gender critical people want to eradicate trans people, and
Mhm.
maybe some of the things that they're saying publicly aren't quite so extreme, and maybe you just agree with just that little bit, and you're horrified to learn the true depths of gender critical. If that's the case, still what you're liking is garbage, but you're not an extremist. But lots of them are hidden extremists. They hide their power level well. But the other thing that I really want to communicate, and maybe you've got an opinion on this, is
Mm.
this is not a surprise to me. And I think to a lot of trans women in particular, but trans people who have been out more than a few years, they will have encountered this many times over. This
Mhm.
situation where a man who is, at least in some sense, liking or promoting or saying, um, you know, uh, gender critical stuff, um, who's really into trans porn. That is like, it's not just like, because I think the first time you hear it, it's like when, you hear like, oh, American pastor who voted against gay marriage found, having sex with a man, or American pastor who
It's
voted
tale
against
as old as
abortion.
time, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's an age-old trope in
but
TV. It's almost
particularly
such
this.
a tired trope that when I see it, it's like I don't know if people watch the Netflix show Sex Education. Like when they did it in that, like I thought they did it well, but it was just like, okay, the homophobic bully is secretly gay. Okay, yeah.
I
I
think,
felt like I was watching Glee a decade earlier or something like that.
yeah, I think that when you're doing it in media, it can be easy to like not just play into a stereotype, but give the impression that the only people who hate gay people are gay people, and that gives
Mm,
straight people like a get out, and it's the same here. Um,
mm,
but I think that the motivation behind particularly gender critical men, but some gender critical women too, is this kind of um, it seems complex, but I actually think it's kind of straightforward thing where they lust over us but hate us. And you might think, oh, is
mm,
this some kind of weird trans thing? It isn't. This is just a very typical feminist thing that you discover about like patriarchy's relationship with women, and how often there will be men who, this is very common. It's not just for trans people. You also see it for like women of color. It's like quite common that racists are obsessed with like porn, or having sex with, or hiring sex workers of the group that they hate. And it's
mm.
it's it's this kind of special dynamic between men and women where this kind of like Madonna whore thing, I don't know if you've heard of that. There's
Mm.
like this dichotomy where men either treat women like Madonna, Madonna, not Madonna the pop star, as in like the perfect, feminine essence and giver of life, and basically like their mother, or they treat women as like a sex object. And I'm not saying all men, and I'm not saying, oh, it's a strict binary, etc., but there's this kind of feminist idea of that, and it's very common. And when you have a minority group, which someone is like part of an oppressor group of, and they consider this other group lesser, they can't really fill this Madonna role. So they all kind of get pushed into this kind of like whore role, which I know is not necessarily the best
Mm.
term, but and
Mhm.
when they see it like that, is part of their dominance over this group is um treating them in an inferior way and treating them as a sex
Mm.
object. And then
Mm.
when this sex object is like really forbidden, like this is a thing that they only think of as like as a sex thing. Often, lots of straight cis men will think of trans people only in the context of sex, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have
totally,
this
totally.
thing which is like this exotic sex object that
Mm.
you also think is subhuman. Then they get these
Mhm.
weird power fantasy like sex things going on, and often the most transphobic men not just are obsessed with trans porn, but want to be like, dominated by trans people in a sex way, and then as soon as it's over, they're all violent again about it. But this just is
Mm,
not. I don't know how well I've communicated this because this is such a a common thing. I feel like it should just on its own have a term um,
mhm,
that
mhm,
applies to this concept, which it really isn't rare and really isn't specific to trans people.
mm,
And I'm not saying that Warm Steve is some kind of like cis oppressor who seeks to dominate trans people in social life and be dominated in the bedroom. That isn't at all. I'm not even like implying that. What I'm saying is this is like a common pattern, and discovering that someone with gender critical sympathies are liking trans porn is just like, oh, well, obviously. I mean, as that little dissonance is probably what is driving each half of it, and
mhm.
I'd be very suspicious at the very least um, about his motivations. But anyway, sorry, I did a bit of a rant
Yeah,
there. I don't know. What
if
do
it
you think on
was,
that?
I agree with everything you said. If it was Warm Steve, that is, it might have been a hacker. I mean, let's think about this. Could there have been a hacker who infiltrated Warm Steve's account 5 years ago and kind of logged on very mischievously every couple of days and liked a bunch of trans porn videos and then logged back out just for us to stumble across it in 2022 on the cusp of these big law changes? That that would be a masterful troll, if so. So if that's the case, I mean,
I mean,
Steve has
yeah,
been the victim of the ultimate troll.
it's not, I guess, impossible that maybe even he has an intern who does his social media. Um,
I really doubt it. But
but
yeah.
I do think
Oh, it
like
was definitely it was a Twitter gremlin.
yeah, I mean, maybe it was one of them trans activists at work at Twitter that Graham Linehan always talks about. Um,
True,
they're,
yes.
they're taking the likes from J.K. Rowling's tweet and putting them onto trans porn for
Mhm.
unsuspecting gender critical men to stumble upon. But
I
like,
mean, you want to hear something interesting? I know some folks who uh, work in similar spaces to Warm Steve, and they privately communicated to me when this came out that they were not surprised at all. That's what they said.
oh,
So, not saying it was him who liked 5 billion porn tweets, but that's what people who work in the same building as him said. So,
oh
yeah.
man, I, I mean, I often one of my strengths slash weaknesses is I always just project the best onto other people and see the best in other people. Um, and I don't know the Steve Guy at all, not even enough. Like I don't know what his voice sounds like or anything. I still just feel a bit sorry for him, even if he is gender critical, just because this situation. But if people have, I just feel like if people at your workplace are like, oh yeah, the guy who likes a load of trans porn, then, then I feel like maybe this my idea of this like confused old man who just doesn't really get trans people and also has a bit of a thing for us in the bedroom. Um, maybe that's one possibility, and the other possibility is like a lot of gender critical men, the majority are massive misogynists. Like that's just a fact. I'm not saying Steve is or not, but like most of them are. Um, and this is all linked. Misogyny and transphobia are linked. Misogyny and homophobia are linked. Um, so just the more, I don't know. I'm not going to make it. I just don't know about Steve. I couldn't possibly make an accusation. But if someone you work with is saying, "Oh yeah, yeah," then you know, oh Steve.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly, in this exact moment, we cannot unequivocally say that Warm Steve has been indulging in these delights for the last however many years. But if he hasn't, in my view, his tweet where he claimed there was interference in his Twitter doesn't quite explain it. I mean, it's kind of funny he's an older guy. He's on AM radio. He's using the language of radio in his explainer tweets. Like,
That's
there's
true.
interference in my Twitter account. Like, there's static in my brain, and I'm sorry if it's caused problems with your feed, with your radio Twitter feed. I'm in here at Twitter HQ moving the dials, and pirate radio hackers are taking over my Twitter.
You
And
know, if
it seems like he doesn't quite know how Twitter works. I mean, obviously he doesn't because all of these videos have been sitting in his likes for years, but that shows in his explanation too. So yeah, I mean, to Steve, I would say if it wasn't you, we want to think the best, but you need to explain this more
I
probably
think
to
we'd need.
us, your loving viewers.
No, I'll have you on, Steve, if you wanna talk about it. Clear your name, etc. It could be interesting. I think that I would want two explanations. One of you know what happened here, and two of this gender critical stuff. Like, are you gender
Mm,
critical? How gender
mm.
critical? Are you a sneaky? I want to eliminate the trans, but I just say I have concerns in public, or are you someone who's just like, I don't get it, and these tweets are showing up on my timeline saying there are only two genders, and I'm like, well, it wasn't my day, and then you just click like without thinking about it, like, because they're not necessarily the best views, whichever you stand there. But the one of them, the one end is really bad, and the other's like some people have like prejudices about trans people just because they don't know any trans people. So maybe come on and talk.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a lot of people will hear that your Twitter account had a load of trans porn likes, and will probably draw their own conclusions, regardless of what we say here.
I mean, I'm interested to hear when he next goes back on air, if that happens. If he talks about it at all, if he mentions it, because the world of local radio broadcasting in Queensland is not gargantuan, and that the tweets about this, mine and others, have really kind of blown up. So a lot of people know about this. So it would be kind of weird if he was to go on air on Monday or whenever he's on next and just didn't mention it. But also interesting, it would be interesting to know what will happen behind the scenes at the ABC in light of this, because surely they'd have to address it somehow. But I wonder what will happen.
Yeah,
I'm sure he's wondering too this weekend.
I, man, I, yeah, that's it's interesting to think. I think that if he does call-in shows, and he does, I mean, whether he addresses it or
Yeah, he
not,
does talk back.
the
Yeah.
next few call-in shows are gonna be spicy.
Warm Steve! Yo, Warm Steve!
Please, no one call him Warm Steve. No, they'll know it. He came from there. But like, I guess what I think, one of the things I was gonna ask is what you thought you would want from this going forwards. Maybe I'll ask you that first before I give my opinion. Like,
Okay.
what do you like in if you were in charge of this whole situation, whatever thing you needed to be in charge of? What would you
I was
like
running
to
the
see?
ship at the ABC. We'd make the logo red. No, yeah. I mean, there is a wider problem in media, definitely at the ABC, with regards to reporting on trans issues, whether that's on their panel shows like Q&A, or on quite an esteemed program they have, Media Watch, which has a host which has repeatedly misgendered trans women on his Twitter account. They have collaborated with high-profile TERFs in producing content which, in my view, is very misleading about issues like this,
Very
about
diplomatic.
self-ID and stuff like that. And as far as I can see, there've been no repercussions in those instances. There's been no corrections issued at the following program. They've just gone on. There's been nothing. Certainly, requests for comment have been ignored in previous instances with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation about similar things. But you do have to imagine, in this instance, this is kind of up a notch in severity because there's the professionalism issue, I guess. I'm sure there's something in some code of conduct about your conduct online, like you are a representative of our, corporation, and you can't be, having porn on your private account. But I mean, to me, the porn thing, if it is him who was liking it, that is kind of funny because it's ironic. Um, I don't want to go and persecute him solely because of that, though. Really, the bigger issue is how gender critical people are brought on to just spout their conspiracies, spout their misinformation, um, with no edit, nothing to counterbalance it. And as we said, even just having someone to counterbalance it, that's really not enough too. You shouldn't have these people on full stop. So if I was if I was running the ship, like we were discussing earlier, the role of the broadcaster when it comes to issues where there are these conspiracies would be to educate the viewer, about the truth. Like, is it true that they are taking children away from parents and mutilating them and putting them on irreversible things at 6 years old? Like, it's just not true. It's just
Yeah,
not true.
fact check your
No,
stuff.
so it would be to correct the record on this stuff.
I think, yeah, no, I definitely agree that the main issue by far is the gender critical thing. Um, I I think that I understand the argument of like professionalism, like you shouldn't be using your public facing work profile if they're linked to be liking porn. I mean, I don't really, that isn't a major issue for me in
Mm,
general. I don't really care, but I can understand as a business that you might care because whatever. What I don't like is the idea in general of someone who works for a company and then who's caught liking porn on their own private thing, or they caught,
mm,
people are made aware that they view porn or something, and then them losing their job. I think that's very bad, and particularly
mm,
when it's they're liking LGBT content, because it's quite common in a lot of places historically for particularly like gay men to be outed as gay because some newspaper journalist or something goes snooping and looks through their bins and then finds like a gay porn magazine or something and then outs them and then they lose their job, and I think that's like disgusting. um there's a possibility here that this gender critical thing is a whole misunderstanding, and like he just happens to like porn with trans
mm,
people in. And if that's the case, like, if your work says to you you cannot like porn on anything related to us, I'm not going to defend you in that situation. I think you should just stop liking porn on your work account. But if they're like, we're going to fire you over the fact that you like porn, I mean, maybe I think that's kind of garbage, and you should really they should just discipline you and say, look, this is how you should use social media. Clearly you don't realize how it works. Either don't use it, or you have to do it the way we say on your own private, on your
mm,
public thing. If the fact that this is trans porn makes it worse, then that reflects badly on ABC, because there's no
mm,
difference between him liking trans porn, gay porn, any porn, like unless
mhm,
it's illegal or involving something really disgusting. Um,
mhm,
but like, just the fact it's got trans people in, the only reason it's relevant to us is because it's he's been liking gender critical stuff. Like, that's why it's an
yes,
interesting, like,
yes.
if he had been liking trans porn and he was like campaigning against global warming measures or something, then the fact that it's trans is completely irrelevant.
Totally.
um
Yeah.
so I think that that's like an important point to make. And if people maybe even watching the stream have watched trans porn, like, we can have an argument about the porn industry and porn as a concept in terms of its role in patriarchy and stuff, but the fact that it's trans porn is like irrelevant from anything like your worth as a human, or whether you're really straight or whatever, or whether you should be employed by a national broadcaster, etc., etc. They're just totally other things. So that's like
Mm.
one thing that I want to say. And like to Steve, this might be super embarrassing for you for a lot of reasons, but the fact it's trans people on its own should not be a source of embarrassment for you. And if it is, maybe that is tied in to why you're sympathetic to gender critical views potentially.
Mm.
Um, and maybe you should address them. And my DMs are open, not for porn reasons, but sometimes people talk through and they're like, I've had men DM me before and be like, I can't stop watching trans porn and I don't really agree with trans rights. And I'm like, let's fucking talk it
Mm.
through then, mate, because that's
Mhm.
completely garbage. Um,
Mm.
and so, I think this is resolvable in a way that you don't need to feel shame. I think being embarrassed that this is an embarrassing situation. There's no getting out of that. Um, but in terms of the main issue here, the only thing that I really care about is that you're like in a load of gender critical bullshit, and gender
Mhm.
critical people, the mainstream of gender critical wants to create a world without trans people. I think that's the
Yeah.
point of where we're at in the UK at least.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Lots of the
It's
major
in
gender
their
critical,
founding texts. It's
it's
in
in
it.
there.
It's
Yeah,
that's it's written plain as day. Yeah.
it's in the Tough Bible. It's
Mhm.
also, I was just saying that Sal's probably like maybe B tier, gender critical. Like the A ranks and the S ranks, lots of them are just saying it, uh, out loud and right now, and none of them are calling out. And the ones that call out the Nazi part of gender critical, uh, get sidelined very quickly and pushed out of the movement. Um,
Mm.
like poor Jane Claire Jones, who I feel like at one point might have A minus rank maybe, and now she's like D tier. Like she's
You need the
just.
tier list. We need a stream where you do a tier list of TAFs.
I
Yeah.
should do a tier list, but like per year, because I feel like they've shuffled around.
Oh yeah, it's like JK. She's dropped down this year. The discourse has not been good.
Well, I think like J.K. Rowling was obviously, she was like whatever the bottom tier, no tier. She was untiered for like years and years, and then 2019 she enters and it's like, oh, she's just E tier
Mm.
at the moment because she's not really done anything, but it's looking bad. And then 2020, pow, straight up to A tier and then straight up to S tier. Really quickly. Like yeah, I think so because Jane Keller Jones was probably like a B plus or an A minus or something, maybe even A. I should maybe be fair to her at some point. Maybe like 2018 or 2019 or something. But then since this like uh Kelly J. Keane rally with the Nazis, um who showed up and like live streamed her event, and then Jane Claire Jones was like, "This is bad. We should not have Nazis in our movement," and everyone was like, "Shut up!" And now she's just like, I haven't really heard from her since. So, um, yeah. Anyway, I think
Mm.
Steve, you need to answer for the gender critical thing, address
Yeah.
the porn thing from the point of view of your employer, and that's all. And don't feel
Yeah.
ashamed that you like trans people.
I mean, there were lots of trans sex workers in his mentions saying, "Hey, Steve, if you stop platforming these
Mm,
people, I'll give you a free subscription to my OnlyFans." So,
very
Steve, the
kind.
offer is out there.
And trans people are kind. That is proper taking one for the team. If you're I don't know actually. I'd be very interested to talk to a trans sex worker if they felt like they were de-radicalizing people, because I know that like I have talked to trans sex workers about this before, and it's a very difficult situation where sometimes in order to get paid, some of these people with a lot of money might want to dehumanize you, and you have to have a line of where that is and stuff. But like can you
Mm,
humanize yourself and win them over? And if
mm.
that's the case, if that's what you believe, um, and you think you can win Steve over with a free subscription to your OnlyFans, that's a good thing. You know that's what the trans rights cause, and you're losing money It's like giving free coffees to someone just so they don't vote to take away your human rights. It's like, you know. But
The
yeah.
other thing that we need to demand is next time Warm Steve goes on air, I want him to be hooked up to a temperature reader and I want to read out live on
Heart
the
rate.
ABC Radio website at all times so we can see how his warmness goes up and down throughout the program.
We might find out that he's
That's
stone
my
cold the
number
whole
one
time.
demand.
We might find he's stone cold the whole time anyway, and then there'll be a twist. He's the real Stone Cold.
Oh, that'd be just another deception that he wasn't warm all along.
I wish I knew literally anything about wrestling because I'm sure that I could make a joke here if I knew anything about Stone Cold Steve Austin.
No,
Actually,
I don't either.
no, I was gonna say my one thing that I thought I remembered from the '90s, but I actually don't think I remember it. So it would just be embarrassing. So yeah, I thought, seeing as I feel like we've told the story now, unless there's any other twists and turns that you have to add.
What did the chat say about the thumbnail, by the way?
Right, yeah. So I was just gonna say, I feel like we've kind of wrapped up the story now. But I was just gonna ask chat if anyone wanted to make a comment or ask any questions. You know, this is your chance to ask Amy, who's like such a violent TRA anti-woman activist or whatever they say about us. That lots of the gender criticals thought that she was responsible for you know, Sal Grover not going on the show, and I am confident
Free.
I am confident there is at least one gender critical person who is theorizing that it is you, and probably another one theorizing that it is me, that has somehow infiltrated Steve's account to put the likes in.
It can be both of us.
In tandem. Yeah, we should do like a high five across the screen. Oh, I'm just hitting you in the head. Don't worry. I was trying to do a... No, don't worry. Okay, too late. But yeah, so if anyone... Like, I'll just... I'm going to read out the super chats in a minute. If anyone's done some, which I know I've seen some scroll past. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions or comments, then please do tag me in at Katie Montgomery on the chat so that I see it, because then it's highlighted. But yeah, and then we'll see where it goes. So we have had... Oh, we've had a couple. That's very kind. So Jotun's daughter says, arrived late because I was at a show with Harbinger and Fury, Elegion, Fallujah, and Rivers of Nihil. Mate, that is a solid fucking lineup. So there's a load of metal bands for anyone who doesn't know. That is a good lineup. Vanilla Gaming says, Australia has some pretty wild moments with transphobia on TV. Just ask Paul Barry. I don't know who that is. Do you know who?
Paul Barry is the host of ABC Media Watch. So I was talking about him before, how he has collaborated with TERF folks in his programming. Media Watch is a program that kind of surveys the media landscape in Australia and seeks to kind of point out when things were reported that were misinformed or things weren't done the right way. And ironically, their reporting of trans issues has been pretty terrible.
Right, okay.
Other thing, folks, we told the story, so now you get the estrogen break, the red pill. And Angie, I know you're watching. Valid. Okay, continue.
Yeah, oh, that's it's disappointing, but I think it's just the case with a lot of media at the moment. I think a lot of news organizations don't really... Either they have transphobic editors, or they don't really know what transphobia looks like, and they're like, oh yeah, that's just our guy who has concerns about women's sex-based rights. It's like, he does not give a shit about women's rights. He doesn't like trans people and he wanks to them. That's, you know, if you ever go into a media org who's like that, that's what he does. I'm telling you, there's no room for maneuvering there. Rob McCallan has sent a little sticker, I think, of a bird with a coffee. That's very kind. And Vanilla Gaming again, wow, thank you very much, has said, it's just his super advanced turf research.
Yes, he needs to see it all. He needs to understand all of the facets, and the only way to do that was by this
several years of What was it?
Yeah,
On the
years, thousands of videos that he bookmarked with his like button.
on
I
Shemale
guess,
Kingdom.
yeah, I mean, I guess he felt like he had to have years worth of expertise in this area before he could have Sal Grover on, so he could combat her bigoted ideas.
Yeah, I'm sure
Maybe the
that's
gender
it.
critical content he liked, that was just research too. He's been trying to understand it all from every angle. Maybe Warm Steve is the ultimate ally.
That
I
I
think
mean,
we've cracked
possibly. Maybe I mean this has definitely brought some kind of
This
eyes
is
to
your
the
out, Steve.
cause.
If you go on air on Monday, that you can say that. You can be our ultimate hero.
Mm. You could be like, I don't even. You could just be like, maybe he's even asexual, and he's just like, well, what I was doing is I know that in order for trans sex workers to make money, a lot of them have to have a Twitter presence and boosting their posts, gets them in front of more eyes, and so maybe he's just boosting trans sex workers. In which case, props to Steve, shout out. Um, yeah, oh, I think this is also like a bit of a meme that it Turf's looking at porn is just research because you see them saying this. It just reminds me of
Oh yeah.
I can't remember her name. I think it's Caroline from like the main Dutch gender critical organization. Just posted,
Mhm.
I'm looking for videos of a slur for trans women masturbating in toilets, please. And it's just like,
Ah.
why are you looking for those? That's
Hmm.
very normal thing to just research. I'm just researching. Does anyone have any good trans porn? For research. So yeah, and I think we just had another super chat. The thing where you can see all the super chats like doesn't live refresh, um,
Oh.
which is a bit rubbish. Maybe there is a way of doing it. I haven't really worked. Oh, I think I can just see it on the live screen. Olivia says we all need another Christmas music video. Yeah, I probably should do one. I planned to do one last year, but I was just seeing if some someone just say, please do not imply that there's turf porn. I don't think there is. Probably, but seeing as usually turfs in particular are usually aligned with radical feminism, and radical feminism is usually quite anti-porn. I can't imagine them really creating their own. But gender critical, on the other hand, they are generally just conservatives, and if you look at like America, for example, I think Pornhub released their like statistics of who searched
Oh
trans porn
yeah.
the most, and
It
it's
was all
just
the
like
red states,
it's
wasn't it?
all the Republican
Yeah.
states, and it's
Mm.
just a conservative thing, so they love it. So,
Mm.
and that's what we're talking about with like gender critical men. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'm never going to say never. Rule 34 and all, but um, it's certainly interesting. Oh, so it's not highlighting my name on it. That's sorry, I'm being a real noob streamer here. Let me look on here. So, um, just looking to see if we've got anything interesting here. So, Alyssa says, TERFs are worried about self ID and people falsifying birth certificates to make it look like they aren't trans. Your thoughts? And then has sent a link. Do you have thoughts on that? I guess we kind of covered that, didn't we?
On people like pretending to transition so they get
Yeah.
access to women's spaces or I mean, it's just idiotic. I mean, it's the kind of thinking that someone who either has whose brain is just brainwashed to the point of total delusion or has never met a trans person before thinks. Like, you know, transition can suck in a lot of ways, not because of things internal to us, but because of how we're treated. And to think that anyone would do that to gain access to a space, like it's just
Yeah. And also, I think the most ridiculous thing about this is it's not even just people not knowing how, like, I've never met a trans person. It's not really know how the world works. Like, surely cis people must be like, well, I've never shown my birth certificate to go to the toilet. So why do you think someone would change their birth certificate so they can go to the women's toilets? It doesn't make any sense. Like, you're just, you know, randomly linking these two issues together and just saying them out loud and then ignoring everyone saying the like common
Hmm.
sense response, which is, but they're not related. Um, and yeah, it's just ridiculous. Um, Someone here says, Amy is great. Thanks for the insight into the wider context of Australia's trans rights. Any other big issues in Australia we might not be aware of on the other side of the planet that you want us to know about? Yeah, so you're obviously doing the self ID thing. What else do you? Is there any other Australian things going on? Like in the world of
Oh,
trans
there's
rights,
always
not in
stuff going
general,
on.
but like, what's your other main campaigns? Because like we've got GRA reform, but we're also pushing for a conversion therapy ban in the UK, for example.
Yeah, and because that stuff is often kind of state and territory based, there's all like little mini
Right.
pushes in different areas around these various issues. Obviously, access to healthcare is super important. You know, it would be very similar stuff, and certainly, as we briefly touched on earlier, um, it's how TERFs and conservatives here are seeking to import what has happened in the UK to Australia, and sometimes not getting there really. And it's kind of interesting because there has been this encroaching anxiety that like it would reach that kind of fever pitch in terms of the culture war discourse, but people generally I think seem to be quite disinterested by the whole thing, which is
Yeah,
very very fascinating.
it
It's
is interesting.
yeah,
Like, cause
I mean, it's good. It's good that they're that they're kind of pushing this and it's not happening. I mean, that's not to say there is no turf stuff going on. Like it's all interlinked, and all the Australian turf people talk to all the UK turf people. Like when we hosted a counter protest against the fake International Women's Day group here in Meanjin/Brisbane, all of the UK people were piling on. You know, my mentions is blowing up because they're
of
all kind
course.
of part of the same networks and stuff. So it's pretty similar in that way in terms of the actors.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny how like LGB Alliance Ireland was run from London, the Twitter account, which is funny for two reasons. One, because it's like, does Ireland not have any gender critical people? Or, it's a very UK phenomenon. But also, secondly, because of our history with Ireland, of like colonizing it and like speaking for them for like hundreds of years, and then Ireland voted in self ID in 2015, and has obviously had no issues with it at all. Um, and like they've been more explicitly anti-gender critical and anti-turf than the UK has by a long way. And like
Mm,
they did a big push for abortion rights, and that was very like trans people were kind of part of the main push for that. And the all of the abortion groups afterwards were like, no, fuck off, British turfs, we're not interested in you. And just then an English person turns up and's like, I'm LGB Alliance Ireland, and it's like, fuck off. Like, this is exactly we've not that I want to speak for Irish people, but the sentiment I saw was like, we've had hundreds of years of British people turning up and pretending to speak for us. Like, fuck off.
mm.
um yeah, just a couple more things and then I think we'll wrap it up. A few
Cool.
people are talking about how you have excellent taste in audio gear. I guess that's the speakers in the
Oh,
background.
really? Thank you. Yeah, sometimes I have like a record, like do the Anthony Fantano thing, have like a record facing forward, but
Oh,
yeah.
you should have. Oh, that's cool.
Thank you. Thank you, folks.
So Caitlin here says, "Hey Amy, the other day I found out about the Auntie Jack show, and it was just refreshing to see a different kind of drag for kids than the pantomime falsetto I'm used to. So I'm curious what you think of her. Do you know who that is?"
Yeah, I think drag is a vehicle for, at the very start of this stream we discussed how, myself as a protest artist in my own work, I seek to produce experiential environments which might help people to understand things that can't be put into words. And I think drag is an art form where that can happen too. You know, I think any one thing can be a blunt tool in isolation. For example, like I kind of feel like when we were doing a counter protest against the turf groups on the streets the other week, just kind of yelling stuff into the microphone, yelling the chants, that stuff is super important. Feeling that solidarity there is super important. But you're not going to change the world's mind just by doing that. You have to come at it from every angle, address all of that, and drag does that, and can be a beautiful thing, an empowering thing, an entertaining thing, a hilarious thing. And I just have infinite admiration for all of those artists doing what they do, and going out and being so intensely visible.
Mm.
Because, as we both know, when you set yourself up as someone who is an activist in a certain area, you're opening yourself to being the one who has to answer all the questions, and the one who faces all the blowback, and the one that the conspiracists claim is behind it all.
Mm.
And
Mm.
drag artists do that, and they're just out there making art, and making the world a better place. And so, yeah, lots of love for those people.
Yeah, it's very, very brave. And I think, when the like this kind of drag kids brunch, whatever, where they just read a book and everyone flips out for no reason, that's very tied into the trans panic. Like it's the same thing, and to a lot of these people, there's no difference between a drag queen and a trans woman anyway.
No,
Um,
exactly.
and I
Yep.
think that in that sense, it's very brave, because if you are um, not a trans person, firstly, choosing to do drag in a political way, you could just not do it in a political way. And particularly to
Totally.
do this kids story time thing, you, in a way, I know that you might feel, this is, and I don't know, this might sound a bit degrading, and this is not what I mean, but you have an opt out. You could just not do drag on the front lines politically, but you're choosing to, and I think that's such a great show of solidarity for LGBT people in general, because you
Mm,
you don't have to do this, and you are,
mm.
and in some places you're the front line now. With this, in some places in the US, the drag queen storytime thing is the thing that they're focusing on the most. Um, so, but yeah,
Yeah.
so we just had a. I'll let you go in a minute. Sorry to
No,
keep
it's
so long.
okay. I mean, I,
Um,
I also wanted to say, like,
yeah, go for it.
I'm an arts educator. I teach at a university here in Mianjin/Brisbane, and I feel that climate that exists around, drag queen story time, because for these conservative people who are pretty unhinged, there's not a lot of difference between drag queen reading books to kids and me as a teacher in the room with my students. That's kind of similar to them. So I feel that all the
Yeah,
time.
for sure. And yeah, and in some places, people like you are potentially caught up in some of these extreme laws like Florida and stuff, where they're like, we're banning trans people performing. And then they're like, performing counts as what? Lecturing? Like, does that count?
Mm,
It's just no,
mm.
so vague. Domestic sent super chat. Very thank you very much, saying, thank you for taking a kinder take on, not me, of course, those who like trans erotica media. Thanks, domestic. I'm sure it's not you. And I think we had another one down here. I'll have to refresh on the other thing. Oh man, I need a better setup for super chats. Eric says, do you think Steve will try and have Salon again after this?
I'll have Salon. Um, you know, I don't think so. I think like after this, I mean, it's hard to know what's gonna happen,
I don't
but
think he's going to
I would
touch trans
imagine
people
that
ever
after
again.
this, yeah, he'll just be so humiliated he won't want to ever remind people about this debacle. That's my thinking, but who knows? Maybe he'll just go full mask off now and say that the TRA cabal hacked his Twitter, and now he's gonna become a full-time gender critical broadcaster. Don't know.
That would
So.
be. I was thinking, like, what is the possible routes from here? One is to just, like, disappear from society. One is to pretend it hasn't happened and just plow on. One is to make up some excuse, or an issue an apology with his wife stood in the background or whatever, and
Mhm.
say, because if you're a straight cis man who's like old and in a position of power, if you do a solemn JPEG, but like the version of that people have been doing for decades, they'll just let you off.
Mhm.
Whatever you've done, and liking porn isn't as big a deal as lots of other people have got let off for. Um, but one option is he goes full like fucking triples down on this and is like, I was hacked by a trans person who's trying to destroy women's rights, and they did it by inserting porn into my like. This is we've seen Meredith, we've seen Graham Linehan, what he did from mild criticism. So anything is possible from here. Um,
Mhm.
but
I
yeah,
think if he was going to go down that route, it would not be at the ABC. But and look, I am not out here calling for anyone's employment to be terminated. But if that occurred as a result of this whole thing, he would be more free to more openly express ideas like that. So
that's true. I don't know if you've got an equivalent of Fox News or GB News there, but in the UK, if he'd be welcome on GB News, I'm sure. So
yeah, I think all the commercial networks in Australia are like that, are on that level.
yeah.
So
But yeah, no, this has been fun. I hope you've had a good morning,
yeah.
like wake up. This has been a good chill out evening for me.
This is how I like to start my day, talking about Warm Steve and his, his portfolio of videos.
Like I was just thinking when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is a funny post. Like I just, quote tweet you, been like, oh, some gender critical man's got caught like in porn, and then someone was like, he's actually on this big show, and I was like, oh, and then it's like it was with Sal Grover, and I was like, oh, and then they were like, he's the host, and I was like, oh, and I was like, mate, just like jumped into your DM straight away. I was like, what do I need to know? And we were like, let's do a stream. So it was good. It was a fun time. Thanks a lot for coming on and sharing your Australian wisdom with us about what's going
Yes.
on in down there.
Yes, all YouTube channels, all streams need the Australian wisdom. So thank you so much for having me on, and thank you to the chat folks too.
Yeah, thanks everyone in chat. I really appreciate everyone turning up. If you actually, we'll say bye to Amy and then do a little quick outro thing. Thanks very much, Amy. I'll talk
Thank
to you in a second
you.
after the show.
Yeah, cool.
So everyone in chat, just a reminder, if you want to help trans kids in the UK, there is a consultation that you can fill in, and the deadline is Sunday, the 4th. I'm not sure what time, so it'd be a good idea to get it done on Saturday, which is tomorrow, in like 20 minutes is Saturday. My last video was about it. If you want to just sit down and have a chill and have some fun and stuff and have a rant and get through it, then me and Dr. Ruth Pierce went through the form together and did our answers. If you just want to go through it in your own time, then you can click on the video description. You don't have to watch the video. And I've got my answers. We've got a guide by Mermaids and Gender Intelligence. And there's some, other suggested answers and guides and stuff to walk you through. It can help. I think we've had, already I've had people DMing me saying that they filled in this consultation because of the video. We don't know what's going to happen, but I do think filling this in is something you can do. And people ask often, what can I do? It's going to take I know my video is like 3 hours long, but that's just because we took it very slow and we did a lot of ranting. You could probably smash this out in 20 minutes and it might make a difference. But yeah, see you on the next video. Thank you very much. Have fun liking trans porn on your work account.